Hello and welcome to the lecture for week 5. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about two different segments of your business plan. One, the operations plan, which is how you're actually going to run your business, how you're going to create the product or service that you intend to give to customers. That involves a choice about facilities. It involves potentially managing a supply chain. If you're dealing with physical products, it involves inventory and, for all businesses, financial control, and a little bit about contingency planning. I'm also going to talk about the management plan. So that's your description in your plan of the group of people that are actually going to pull off what you're trying to do. It's usually the second thing that somebody reads when they read your plan. I've mentioned before that they don't read it like a book from beginning to end. They'll usually read the executive summary, which is the last thing you'll write. And if they're grabbed by that and they think that's really interesting, the next thing they're going to read is a management plan to say, that's a really good business idea. Do they have the people that can actually pull it off? So in this part, you'll talk about key employees and principals or top management in your company, your approach to compensation and incentives, importantly, whether you're going to have a board of directors or an advisory committee, and then lines of authority, meaning an organizational chart, what your style is going to be, and for some of you, it may be beneficial to talk about social responsibility, and triple bottom line is one way of talking about that. So those are the items that I'm going to cover in this week's lecture. So an operations manual, and I put this in red text so that it jumps out at you, this is not part of your business plan. So this is just something that I recommend based on my experience that you have before you actually start your business. So if you're actually going to take the idea that you're using in this class and you're going to go actually start it, one thing that's really beneficial to do is to document all of the procedures in the company. How do we receive an order and approve someone's credit? What are the processes involved in fulfilling that order? What sort of procedures do we have for handling cash, for receiving payments and for making payments? What is our process for determining pay and executing payroll? All of the different things. How do we handle customer service? How quickly do we respond to a customer's email or phone call? All of those kinds of things should be documented. The primary reason for that is you can't hold people to a high standard if you haven't clearly told them how it is you want their job to be done. So that's an important thing to do. I did that when I bought Big Toys. I kind of had to do it because I was putting in a new computer system, and so people needed instructions on how to do their jobs within that computer system. But I found it was beneficial beyond that. So that's just a strong recommendation. So within your plan, you're going to talk about the facilities that you're going to need for either providing the service that you intend to provide or the product you intend to provide. For some of you, this will be more important than others. Certainly, if you have a retail location, you're going to want that to be convenient to customers. If you're doing a production of a product, being near the factors of production, like being near supply of raw materials or being near workers that have that expertise, those could all be factors. So think a little bit about whether or not you need to be located somewhere based on how your product is going to get made, or if you need to be located somewhere where it's easy for customers to get to you if it's more of a retail type of thing. You're benefiting from the fact that it is very much a buyer's market for commercial real estate right now. Because of work from home, remote work trends following COVID, there is a glut of commercial space available. Kind of a combination of post-COVID remote work and the move to online purchasing, so Amazon and those kinds of companies, there's a lot of retail space and office space available, which means that you can dictate fairly beneficial terms for yourself in terms of whether or not the rent is going to increase each year or if it's going to stay flat, how long the lease needs to be. You want a shorter lease rather than a longer lease. Because you want that flexibility to get into a larger space if you need to, or a smaller space if you need to. And then how are leasehold improvements going to be handled? So leasehold improvements, say you're going to open a retail space, you may need to change the lighting, the flooring, install racks or shelving or things like that. You may need to change the space to make it right for your business. And anything that you change that is physically a part of that space, like flooring or lighting or those sorts of things, those become the property of the owner of the building when you leave. So you don't get to take those back with you. So who pays for that is negotiable. I've negotiated leases before where I've told the landlord that I would stay and sign a continued lease if they did certain things, moved walls around, did certain kinds of construction projects. I didn't necessarily want to invest in their building, so I made it a condition of continuing a lease. So know that that is negotiable. As are utility and maintenance costs. And maintenance costs include both the cost of your space and any common spaces like parking lots and that sort of thing that you share. You have to be careful about that because if it's not negotiated that the landlord pays that, then you could end up getting a surprise bill for repairs to the roof, your share of that sort of thing that you didn't anticipate. Is there room for growth? So are you bounded on different sides by other businesses that would make it difficult for you to expand your space without a wholesale moving from one location to another, which is very disruptive, so something to consider. And then compatibility with other tenants. What other kinds of businesses are located near yours, and is that going to attract other customers for you, or is it going to keep them away? That sort of thing. So production plan, all of you are going to produce something, either a product or a service, and usually that's done through employees. So how are you going to handle employees? Are you going to have hourly workers, salaried workers? So how are you going to, is there going to be incentive compensation, piece rate type pay, that sort of thing? A lot of startup companies will use temporary labor to start. That's calling an agency and saying, I need somebody like this, please send them over. You're not putting that person on your payroll. They're on the payroll of the agency that you're contracting with. So you pay a higher hourly rate, but that includes benefits and payroll taxes and all those kinds of things that you don't have to pay then. The benefit of going with temporary labor is you can meet short-term bursts in demand. I ran a company that was just myself for 3 years, and I would need help unloading shipping containers. That's only once a month, maybe. I would need somebody for a day or two. So temporary labor was a perfect way of meeting that demand. I didn't need a full-time 40-hour-a-week person to be standing around waiting for the next container to come in. So temporary labor was a good way of resolving that need. The other benefit of temporary labor is it allows you to try people out. So if they send somebody over and that person's not a good fit, or they show up late, or they're lazy, you just call the agency and say, don't send that person back. Send me somebody else tomorrow, that sort of thing. Every once in a while, you get a diamond in the rough. You get somebody that's really, really good, and you think, man, I want this person on my team. You can negotiate then with the agency to convert that person to a full-time employee. Usually you need to pay some money to the agency in order to do that, but I got lucky once and ended up hiring the guy that became the supervisor of my entire warehouse that came to me through a temp agency. So that's a good way to do it. Use of subcontractors is something you can do if you need a task done, but keep in mind that you can't tell the person how the job is to be done, only that it needs to be done. It's common to do that with janitorial services, things like that, where you say, I want the office cleaned once a week, floors washed, surfaces dusted, bathrooms cleaned, that sort of thing, but you can't tell them exactly how to do, what products to use, all that kind of stuff. So a production plan is going to take into account primarily for most of you supply chain. So all of you are going to be buying something from somebody unless your business is purely a service business. So if you're buying something from somebody, then you're going to have to find suppliers. Suppliers for raw ingredients, suppliers to make your product potentially if you've outsourced your production. And some things to consider. One is the reliability of quality. Can they make a good part that meets your specifications, and can they do that over and over and over again reliably? If they provide a shipment to you and you open the box and it's not correct, that's going to put you in a position where you're letting your customers down because now you can't fulfill an order. So quality is listed first there because it is the most important. And it has to be, you often have to go to their location to figure that out and make an assessment. Is a place clean? Is it orderly? Is it well lit? Do they have the capability of doing what it is I'm asking them to do, or is it a stretch for them? You're placing a great deal of trust in your suppliers to produce the kind of quality that you want your product to have. So I can't stress that enough, how important that is. Price is also an issue. If they're pricing what they're selling you too high, then that's going to cause you to be overpriced in the market. Distance, that impacts two things. One, it impacts how long it's going to take to get to you. So what your planning is involved in that can make it more challenging, especially if it has to cross an ocean. It also adds cost to the mix because it costs money to move products around. Minimum order levels is also important. You don't want to be in a position where that supplier says, we only want to make your product if we can do a large production run, so you end up having to buy a year's worth of something. I'll talk about inventory levels shortly, but that has many drawbacks associated with it. So what kind of order are they willing to process for you? Relationships with first-tier suppliers and reliability of deeper tiers. So tiers refer to the layers of suppliers that might exist. As an example, in my outdoor fitness company, we dealt with a supplier in China that made the final product for us. We didn't have any production capabilities, so that supplier made the finished outdoor fitness equipment for us. That was our first tier supplier. They're the first rung in the ladder. But that company didn't make every single thing that they used to make our product. They used a rubber molding company. They used a plastic injection molding company. They used an outside company to glass blast the material to give it a certain finish. They used another company to acid dip the material to clean it. So they used a variety of other suppliers. And so I not only had to worry about that first tier supplier, can they do their job, but I also had to go and visit those deeper tiers that were in effect suppliers to my supplier to find out, are they doing things properly? Do they have a good facility? Are they well managed? That sort of thing. A lot of times it's a good idea, I would actually say all the time, it's a good idea to have a supply agreement in place. So you meet with a supplier and you discuss all of these issues: quality, price, minimum order levels, all of those, lead time. How long do they have to produce a product from when you give them an order? Payment terms, credit levels, all of that. All of that should be discussed in advance, agreed upon, and documented in a supply agreement. If it's super complicated, you might want to involve a lawyer. If it's fairly straightforward, it's something you can write on your own. As with any agreement, the extent to which you discuss things and document them and both parties are on the same page, you're less likely to have disputes or arguments later. So it's important to do that rather than, I thought you were going to do this and you thought you were going to do that, and those kind of arguments. Once you pick a supplier, it's important to do ongoing supplier evaluations. So it's not enough just to pick a good supplier and then coast. You need to say, are they doing what they said they were going to do? What is the error rate in the shipments I'm receiving from them? If they said that they could ship product within 30 days of receipt of order, are they actually doing that? Or are they consistently late? Those kinds of things. And then many of you will deal with outsourcing. It takes substantial capital if you're going to make a physical product to get the factory and the machines and all of that kind of stuff in place. So many of you will probably exchange lower margins for having someone else make your product for you. The benefit to that is you don't have that upfront cost of building the factory. You don't have that kind of overhead. If your sales dip, you have to keep your factory busy regardless, those kinds of things. You can't be laying people off and hiring them back constantly. With outsourcing, that's just, you give the supplier an order or you not give them an order. They have other business that can sustain their factory. So those are the benefits of outsourcing. The main disadvantage of outsourcing is that nobody is going to care about your product like you will. Nobody's going to care about your customers like you will. So that can be a challenge. So inventory control, almost all of you are going to have some kind of inventory. So it's important to think about what your policies are going to be. How much do you want to keep on hand? So the risk of having too little inventory, of running out or a stock out situation, is that you can't fill a customer's order, and that customer will likely then go buy their product from somebody else, and you've lost that customer. So that's the downside of not having enough. The risk of having too much inventory, first and foremost, is it ties up your cash. Imagine if you bought a year's worth of inventory of everything you're going to need. You have to pay those suppliers, usually 30 days from when they ship it. So you pay all of that money. You don't have that money in the bank now to pay other bills, to meet payroll, to pay your rent, to pay yourself, all of those kind of things. That money is now tied up in product that's on a shelf. And that's not liquid. You can't pay people with inventory. So that's the primary problem. Additional problems are now you have to have a bigger warehouse, you have to have more racks, more forklift drivers, more forklifts. There are all kinds of costs associated with storing a lot of inventory. In addition to that, you have the problem of breakage. The more stuff that you have in your warehouse, the greater likelihood is that somebody's going to hit something with a forklift, knock something off a shelf and damage it. All of those things then go in the dumpster, and that's your money going in the dumpster. Lastly, you have the risk of obsolescence. You buy a year's worth of inventory, and the next day you figure out a better way to build your mousetrap, a better design, a safer product, less expensive product. Well, now you have to wait a year to implement that improvement because you've got stuff on the shelf that you want to go get through first, or you have to eat that inventory, throw it away. So the way companies manage that risk of having too little or too much and make decisions like that is through a management information system. Technically, they're called an ERP, or an enterprise resource planning system. That takes all the complexity of lead times, safety stocks, orders coming in, inventory levels, all of that, and it makes suggestions as to what you should do. You should buy this now in this amount, or you should do this production run. Those systems are fairly complicated and expensive, so if you're going to be doing your own manufacturing, that would be an important thing to factor in. In terms of quality control, think of quality not in terms of like the very best, highest kind of quality, like a Rolls-Royce or something like that. But think of quality in terms of consistently over and over and over again producing a product that is consistent with the promises you made to the customer. If you made a promise to the customer that your product is going to be corrosion resistant, then how do you ensure that it is always corrosion resistant, that it will never rust, because that's the promise you've made? As an example, there are outside agencies. ISO 9000 is one type of certification. It's an international organization that comes to your business and they examine your process for ensuring that you do what you say you're going to do each and every time, or a very, very, very high percentage of times. If they're satisfied that you have a system in place, and when I say system, I mean it's not dependent on the heroic efforts of an individual, right? It's not because Bob is really good at his job. It's because you have a system in place that ensures you're going to deliver what you've promised. If they feel you have that system in place and they see that it's being used reliably and consistently, they'll award you ISO 9000 certification. What that award tells other companies is that they can trust you. They can buy from you and know they're going to get what you've promised them they'll get when they're supposed to get it. So it's a good way of kind of signaling to customers that you know what you're doing and they can trust you. So distribution deals with how you get your products to customers. Many of you are going to go through a third party. There'll be somebody between you and your customer. You're going to make a product, it's going to be on a shelf on a store. You're going to make a product and somebody else is going to then suggest it to a customer, and it's part of the service they offer. So it's important that you choose distributors that are a good match with the target market you ultimately want to serve. That they have those connections, that they're meeting with those people, they have a reputation with your target market, that sort of thing. It's important, based on my personal experience, to avoid putting all your eggs in one basket. So have a variety of distribution channels. So if one is not doing as great a job as you had hoped, you have others that make up for it. And then monitor and change distributors when necessary. So keep in mind that those companies, their goal is to grow their company and for their company to be profitable. If that also helps your company, well, that's good, but it's not their primary criteria. So if you feel that they're not making an adequate effort to distribute your products, then you have to have the ability and the gumption to make a change. And not hope for tomorrow to be a better day. So order fulfillment and customer service, that may be your biggest advantage over other players. So when you're small, you can know your customers better. You can know people on a first name basis, greet them when they come in the door, that sort of thing. And that could be a big advantage over big faceless kinds of companies. One thing that is really important, and again, the reason I put it in red, is to under-promise and over-deliver. If you believe you can have a product to a customer by Friday, tell them it'll be delivered on Monday so that they're pleasantly surprised when it shows up on Friday. That gives people a small degree of joy, and if you can do that, people are going to be happy with you. Train and promote employees to handle customers according to your vision. So all of you have an idea about how you would interact with a customer, what lengths you would go to keep a customer happy. Make sure that your staff knows that that's what you expect, knows what the boundaries are, what they can agree to, what they can offer to keep a customer happy, and then celebrate that when it happens right. Catch somebody doing it like you want them to do it and call attention to that so that people understand, okay, that's what we're looking for here. And often that means building flexibility into your policies, letting people exercise some judgment in order to do great things. So financial controls are going to be important for any business owner. So make sure that you have procedures in place that make sure that all of the financial transactions in your business are handled accurately and promptly. Don't trust anybody. And that seems like a bold thing to say, but you can't look into somebody's soul and in an interview and know whether or not they would steal from you. It's impossible to determine that. And so you need to have policies that make it very difficult for somebody to do the wrong thing. Okay. So when I talk about fraud, when I teach accounting, I talk about opportunity and rationalization and pressure. And of those three things, the only thing you can do something about is opportunity. You can eliminate opportunities for somebody to put cash in their pocket, to endorse a check over to themselves, to take inventory and sell it on the side to a friend, all of those kinds of things. So put procedures in place, and your outside accountant can help you with that. They do that a lot for businesses. They understand a lot about internal control. That's what we're talking about. And they can help you put policies in place for that. Recognize that cash is king. You can have increasing sales every month, you can be profitable every month, and you can go bankrupt. By going bankrupt, I mean you don't have cash in your bank to pay your rent or pay your employees or pay your debts. And when that happens, you're forced into bankruptcy. The landlord puts a lock on your door, you can't get in, you're done. The way that can happen is if cash flow isn't managed properly. That usually comes from two sources. Customers not paying you on time according to terms. You can have a lot of people that owe you money, but if you don't have the money, you can't pay your bills. And the item I mentioned earlier, you could have too much inventory. You have shelves and shelves and shelves full of stuff that you've paid for, but that's not cash. You can't pay your bills with it. So recognize that that is critically important. Cash is king. And then don't wait for month-end statements. So you may have an accountant working for you and they may tell you, well, every month it takes me 10 days to close the month and then I'll have financial statements for you. So you're waiting to find out how you did. That's ridiculous. You should get information daily. At a minimum, you should be told today what your sales were yesterday, what cash came in yesterday, what cash went out yesterday, and what your cash balance is. Those 4 things you should know every single day, and any accountant can do that for you. So your operations section should cover. This is an important slide. Make sure you have this handy when you're writing the operations section. It should address the issues that are essential to your company. You need to describe how you're going to make your product or create your service. Who's going to do that? You need to address the issues that give you a distinctive competitive advantage. So are you going to do it in a way that helps reduce cost, is more efficient? Are you at higher quality? How are you going to do it better than your competitors in terms of creating your product? And then how you overcome a frequent problem in your industry. So every industry has challenges, supply challenges, labor challenges, regulatory challenges, those kinds of things. So how are you going to overcome that? Assume that the person reading your plan has some knowledge about your industry and they're wondering how you're going to deal with the problem that industry has. Okay, on to management. So very good book, Good to Great. They looked at a whole variety, I think 10 different pairs of companies that were all about the same size in the same industry. And one of the companies went on to be very, very successful and grow significantly while the other company stagnated and did poorly. And they looked at the difference between those 2 companies to say what causes that to happen across a variety of industries. And what they found was it was the type of people that were hired. I think all of you probably recognize that business is changing very rapidly. Consumers are changing their demands, what they expect rapidly. Technology is changing rapidly, all of that. Globalization is changing things. So because things are changing rapidly, you can't necessarily hire just based on who is smart about what you need right now. Because what you need right now is going to be different than what you need next year and 5 years and 10 years. It's very disruptive to hire somebody, suck all that you can out of them, fire them, and hire somebody else. That's not a path to success. So you need to hire people that are capable of learning and capable of adapting, people that have the ability to do that and have the right kind of, they're wired the right way. They're kind of built in a way that they appreciate and are good at that and fit in well with your team. That's the important part. So some of the things that are important to ask yourself about key employees: do they possess the necessary skills? Every time I teach this class, there's usually somebody that wants to open a restaurant and they'll describe their management team, and nobody on the team has ever worked in a restaurant or anything. And so that's obviously a failing. That would be concerning to anybody that would read it. So do they have experience and skills in what you need? Do they either have a record of success or have they experienced setbacks that they've learned from? I would argue that it's almost better to hire people that have been through a setback, have been through a bankruptcy or been through a business failure that they learn from and they know the mistakes not to make going forward. And then will their personalities make them effective members of the team? That is so important. And it's really, really difficult to judge. The best way I have found to kind of get a judgment on that is to do group interviews. So have other people involved with the interview, trying to read the person's personality and whether or not it's going to be a fit in your organization. People can be smart, they can be hard workers, and they could have the skills that you need, have the experience that you need. But if they don't mesh well with the rest of your team, you're going to have communication problems, you're going to have drama that you have to manage, all of those kinds of things, which is completely non-productive. None of those efforts move you forward. So make sure you pick somebody that is a good fit. Make sure that they know how to manage others effectively if you're going to ask that of them. Managing or supervising other people is not an innate trait that we are born with. It's something that you are taught, either through experience or through education. So do they have that? And then lastly, do they complement your skills? It is a natural inclination for people to try to hire clones of themselves. They think, I'm so awesome, if I had more of me, it would be great. Well, you don't really need more of you. You need people that complement you, that make up for what some of your weaknesses are. So you have to really look at yourself carefully and say, what am I good at? What am I not good at? Maybe I'm not the most extroverted person and I don't like talking in crowds. I need somebody that is good at that, right? Or I'm not really good at knowing all of the details. I'm more of a big picture guy. Well, then you need somebody that is good at the details. So think about what your uh, soft parts are, your weak points, and then hire somebody to kind of complement that. So I will talk a little bit more about what is going to be in this section of the plan. One of those things I'll mention is key employees. And what you want to describe for the top 2 or 3 people in your business, including yourself. Address the experience that they have that's relevant to your business. Any successes they may have had in the past that would give credibility to what your success might be. What education they have, what strengths they have. If there are areas where they lack strength and you know how to address that, mention that. That type of honesty will give credibility to your overall plan. And knowing the situation that most of you are in where you don't necessarily have your top management picked out, it's perfectly fine to say position to be filled at a later date. So you may have marketing manager, position to be filled at a later date, and then describe my ideal candidate will have a bachelor's degree in marketing. They will have worked in a marketing position at a firm bigger than our firm, those kinds of things. So one of the things that you should do in your plan is have an organizational chart. There is I think you click on Smart Art in PowerPoint and pick hierarchy, and it will allow you multiple different ways to do organizational charts. I made this one in PowerPoint. This is the last org chart for the company I own, Big Toys, before we sold. This organizational chart is done in a departmental fashion. So which departments exist in the company, who's the manager of those departments, who works for them, that sort of thing. You wouldn't have something necessarily this elaborate, but you would maybe have the top 2 or 3 levels in your company, what that would look like. Keep it clean, simple. Again, if you don't have names, it's to be named later, and it's the positions that are important. So that's something that readers of business plans would expect to see, and it gives them a quick overview of, okay, this is how this is going to be organized. So consultants is something that you should address in your plan, how you're going to use consultants. The advantage of using a consultant is that you can meet a short-term need, that you don't necessarily have enough of that need to warrant a full-time employee. As an example, all of you will need a website. You don't need to hire somebody, a full-time employee, that does nothing but work on your website in all likelihood. So you can hire somebody that is capable of designing and building a website that functions a particular way. That's a consultant, right? You hire them, they do that job, it's done. You could do the same thing with IT, setting up your servers, those sorts of things, or your cloud storage. Whatever the case is, you may need somebody for a short period of time, and a consultant is a good way to do that. The disadvantage of using consultants is that the way they grow their business is by getting you to use more of their services. So you always have to kind of tap the brakes and be a little bit wary of allowing them to do as much as they want, because they would do this for you full-time at $200 an hour if you were to let them, right? So be careful about that. I've listed a variety of consultants here. I'll mention each of those, but you should all have at least 2 consultants. You should all have a tax accountant, so somebody that understands how you can make decisions to minimize your tax liability. And you should all have a business attorney that you can consult with for contracts, for leases, for corporate documents, those kinds of things. You'll need somebody with expertise in that way to make sure you don't make mistakes that are expensive. Some companies will use management consultants, and my experience has been that they're usually used to solve a problem that allows the owner of the company to kind of keep their hands clean. They can say, we have dysfunction here, come in and fix it, and I'm not the bad guy then. You probably won't need that to start with. Hopefully you'll never need it. Marketing consultants can be very beneficial because they are really up on all of the changing requirements and nature of marketing electronically, or digitally. So people that understand about how to market in social media, how to get more clicks, how to drive more traffic to your website. We talked about that earlier when we talked about marketing plans. So that's having somebody with that expertise that can come and help you, and then they're done. That's a good way to do it. I have used designers in the past, both product designers and graphic designers for different things. That's definitely a skill that I didn't have, and it's not something I needed enough of to warrant a full-time employee. There are industry specialists, people that know about, especially if you're going to be in an industry that has a lot of regulatory requirements. If you're going to be involved in making food, which many students choose to do, make sure that you have a consultant that can teach you about health codes and complying with all of that. And then some of you may need a technology specialist, somebody that knows about programming or about the tech that is involved in your business, if that's applicable. So one thing I haven't mentioned here that kind of falls under consultants, and I don't have a slide for this, is board of directors or a advisory committee. So that's a group of people that kind of oversees your business and helps you. I would recommend that you go with an advisory committee, not a board of directors. So a board of directors is applicable if you're running a business that you expect to go national and be very large and potentially be a publicly traded company at one point. A board of directors is appropriate in that kind of situation. The problem is a board of directors, they have personal legal liability over what your business does. So if your business does something stupid and ends up hurting a bunch of people, the members of the board of directors can be sued by those people for not exercising oversight over your business. So usually you have to buy insurance to cover that risk for those people, so there's an expense associated with it. And again, the formal nature of a board is a bit restrictive for many small businesses. An advisory committee is beneficial in that you would have maybe 2, 3, or 4 people that you can meet with on a regular basis, usually quarterly, to show them how the company's doing, share financials with them. Basically, you're an open book for those people. And their job is to ask questions, find things that you might have overlooked. Sometimes you can be so deep in the details of your business that you miss the forest for the trees, that kind of a thing. So they can help spot those kinds of blind spots for you and help you in that regard. You can also try out ideas on them. I mentioned before that owning a business can be a lonely thing because you can't really have an open, honest conversation. Say you're thinking about maybe selling your business. You can't talk to your employees about that and get their advice. So this is a group that understands your business, that has some involvement in it from an advisory standpoint, and you can try these ideas out on them and get really clear objective feedback. So that's really a beneficial thing to do. I'd recommend you include that in your plan. So your management style, what is the culture of your business going to be? How are you going to interact with your employees? What's it going to be like to work there? What are your policies going to be? What level of communication? What are you going to share with employees? How are you going to make efforts at recognizing good performance? To what ability are employees allowed to affect change? If you're running a restaurant, can employees come up with new recipes and the special of the day, or do you dictate that? Those kinds of things. And then what are you going to do with regard to fairness? So this might be a paragraph that you talk about that. So if you think about the 3 major groups of stakeholders in a business, employees, owners, and customers, most businesses say we're going to put customers first, and everything will shake out if we do that. Well, there's a couple of innovative companies, Southwest and Starbucks are 2 of them, that have kind of turned that upside down. And their approach is, we're going to treat employees that their needs are going to be number one on our list. We are going to take care of them. We're going to make this a fantastic place where people love to come to work. They're happy it's Monday. I get to go to work again. That kind of a place. They have a smile on their face. They're happy. The belief is that if you have employees that are ecstatic at working for your company and proud of working for your company, that they're going to treat customers well as a natural course of things. If customers are treated well by those happy employees, your business is going to grow and the owners are going to get returns and they will be happy. So it's an interesting way of looking at things, and I just want you to kind of plant that seed with you. Now, for some of you, this next topic will be relevant. For others of you, it won't. But if kind of the bigger picture, your impact on the world is important to your readers, an important part of your business, for some of you it is, then you may want to think about talking about triple bottom line. So triple bottom line looks at a business from three perspectives. All start with a P, so it's easy to remember. One is profit. So the business needs to earn a profit. They need to be successful at being a business so that they can grow, right? You can't be good stewards of the environment, be good stewards of people if you're losing money every year and you go out of business. So profit is part of it. Planet. What are you doing with regard to sustainability? Are you making the planet better or worse through your activities, right? Are you consuming raw materials that are not replenished? Are you adding to landfills? Those kinds of things. Are you consuming an excess amount of energy and contributing to climate change? So what are you doing in that regard? And then lastly, people. How are you treating the community in which you live? How are you treating your employees? How are you treating your customers? What are you doing in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion? How are you making people truly a part of what you're doing and lifting people up? So those three areas are something worth talking about if that's part of your business. So the second important slide, make sure you pay attention to this, have it handy when you're writing this section. Each of these things would probably be a solid paragraph in this section. So describe the top 2 or 3 people in top management, as I mentioned in the previous slide, all of the things to talk about for each of those people. You'd probably have a paragraph for each of them, right, including yourself. Talk about either a board of directors or an advisory committee. What kinds of people might you want to be on the advisory committee? How might often you meet? What things will you talk with about them? What will be their backgrounds? That sort of thing. What kind of outside consultants are you going to use? Again, mention at least tax accountant and a business attorney, but what other kinds of consultants might you use to help your business? What is your management structure going to be? And I talked about having a simple org chart in your plan. And then, if applicable, talk about your approach to triple bottom line. How are you going to address those 3 areas? And again, if your business has think about attracting a younger workforce. They're going to want to know that kind of thing. So I would address that if it's applicable for you. So that's the end of this lecture. Thank you for your attention, and as always, please contact me if you have any questions. Thank you.